prices go up. And the whole country reaches for the same two suspects. One side points at the corporation, greedflation, the grocery chain, the oil major, the CEO grinning on the earnings call, jacking up the number on the shelf because he can. The other side points at Washington, the money printer, trillions conjured out of nothing, spent and dumped into the economy. Both camps are staring at the checkout counter. That is the mistake. The retailer raising the price is not capturing inflation. He is passing it through. His margin barely moved. That price tag is the last link in a chain that started months earlier, miles from the store, at a place nobody in the fight is watching. The money does not get destroyed in a fire that burns everyone equally. It moves. It exits one set of pockets and lands cleanly in another. Let's trace exactly whose. Start where the anger is. The visible operator, the supermarket, the gas station, the brand on the box. These are the faces on the pitchforks. But look at the real numbers. Net profit margins in American grocery retail run somewhere between 1% and 3%, thin in the best of years. When their costs rise, they raise your price to survive, not to feast. They are a toll collector who hands almost the entire toll to someone upstream. Blame lands here, money does not stay here. Go up a layer. The financial sector, banks, the players positioned closest to where new money actually enters the system. Consider the scale of what entered. In barely 2 years around the pandemic, the American money supply, the measure called M2, swelled by roughly 40%, from about $15 trillion to nearly $22 trillion. That money did not fall like even rain across the country. It came in through specific doors. It showed up first at the banks, in the asset markets, at the front of the line. They lend it, deploy it, and buy with it before the price of everything else has caught up. They are not paying tomorrow's prices. They are spending today's. Now the top, the tier that owns the choke point, 2 occupants, the asset-owning class. Inflation lifts the nominal value of stocks, real estate, and commodities. Close to 90% of all stock is held by the wealthiest 10% of households. And above even them, the largest borrower on the planet, the government itself, north of $36 trillion in debt, and a currency it alone gets to issue. Inflation quietly shrinks the real weight of that debt, while the printing of the money hands it a gain before the first price tag ever ticks upward. That gain has a name. It is called Seigniorage, the profit the issuer captures simply by creating money. But Seigniorage is only half of it. The real engine has a name most people have never heard, and it is 300 years old. The Cantillon Effect. Richard Cantillon, a banker writing in the 1700s, noticed something that violates how everyone assumes inflation works. New money does not raise all prices at the same moment. It enters at a single point and spreads outward slowly like ink dropped into still water. Picture that drop. The ink lands in one spot. Whoever is standing exactly where it lands gets to spend that new money first, at the old prices, before the color has reached anyone else. The people at the far edge of the pool get the money last, if at all. What reaches them first is not the money, it is the price increase. That is the whole trick. Proximity to the source is everything. Whoever touches new money first spends it at yesterday's prices. Whoever touches it last, the wage earner waiting on a raise that arrives quarters late, pays tomorrow's prices with yesterday's paycheck. Economists have a dry phrase for that lag: sticky wages. Your rent reprices in a month. Your salary reprices, if you are lucky, once a year. The gap between those two speeds is not an accident. It is where the purchasing power goes. And the same logic rewards anyone with the nerve to owe big. Lock in a fixed rate, then let inflation shrink the real burden and repay in softer dollars. Corporations understand this. So does every homeowner sitting on a 30-year mortgage while prices climb. The larger the debt, the larger the quiet gift. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The party capturing the most from inflation takes none of the blame for it. The government, the banks, the asset holders sitting at the source collect quietly and walk away clean. The grocer, whose margin never budged, gets the mob. Inflation is treated as a disaster. But a disaster for whom? Not for the largest debtor in the world, watching the real value of what it owes evaporate. Not for the man who owns the building, the shares, the land. For those players, the crisis is a windfall wearing a warning label. The thing everyone calls a catastrophe is, to the people at the spigot, a payday. So, why does the crowd keep staring at the shelf? Because the shelf is the only part of this they can see. The price tag is visible. The central bank's balance sheet is not. The Treasury's borrowing is not. The frontrunner who cashed in months ago is not. All of it happens off stage, and then the bill appears at the register with someone else's name on the receipt. The greedflation versus big spending fight is perfect precisely because it is unwinnable and it points the wrong way. Both sides are arguing about the last inch of a very long pipe. And while they argue, the mechanism keeps running. Understand what inflation actually is to the entity that issues the currency. It is a tax, but it is the one tax that never gets voted on. No bill passes, no signature is required, no representative has to stand up and defend it. It does not appear on your pay stub as a line item. It simply lowers what your money buys, and the loss gets blamed on a company. For a government that wants revenue without a fight, there has never been a cleaner instrument. The people paying it are convinced someone else is the thief. That is not a flaw in the story. That is the purpose of the story. History has run this experiment, twice brutally, in ways almost nobody remembers correctly. Germany, 1921 to 1923. The mark collapsed into wallpaper. Everyone knows the photographs, wheelbarrows of cash, banknotes burned for heat. What gets left out is who won, a man named Hugo Stinnes. He borrowed on an industrial scale in marks and used the loans to buy hard assets, mines, factories, shipping lines, forests, newspapers. Then the currency died, and when it died, so did his debts. They inflated into nothing, while the empire he had bought with them stood untouched. By the time he was finished, his conglomerate reportedly stretched across some 1,500 companies. He came out the other side, reportedly the most powerful industrialist in the country. The press called him the inflation king. And the German middle class, the savers, the pensioners, the bondholders who had done everything right, watched their life savings shrink to less than the price of a loaf of bread. The prudent were wiped out, the leveraged asset buyer inherited the economy. Now, the version where the winner is not a man, it is a government. The United States, after the Second World War, owed a debt larger than its entire economy. It had crested near 120% of national output. And it did not pay that mountain down with hard dollars. It inflated, and it held interest rates deliberately below the rate of inflation, a maneuver economists later named financial repression. The bondholders, the savers, the citizens who had bought war bonds out of duty earned returns that lost to rising prices year after year. Researchers studying this stretch called it exactly what it was, the liquidation of government debt, a quiet default nobody had to declare, running a few percent of the economy every year. The debt-to-output ratio fell by more than half in a decade, and a real share of that was simply taken from the people holding the bonds. The government never missed a payment. It just repaid in dollars worth a fraction of what it had borrowed. Same move. Once by a private raider, once by a sovereign, the saver lost both times. Strip it to the ledger. The saver and the wage earner pay. The borrower and the asset owner collect. And the largest borrower of all is the one holding the printing press. The figure sits in plain sight, north of $36 trillion in federal debt. And every single point of inflation quietly erases hundreds of billions of it in real terms. Purchasing power, lifted from bondholders and savers who will never see a bill, never cast a vote, never catch the hand that took it. Hugo Stinnes understood the position a century ago. Owe enormously, own hard, and let the currency do the rest. Governments have never forgotten it. It is the oldest revenue trick in existence, and the only one where the victim thanks the wrong person and reaches for a pitchfork aimed at the store clerk. Inflation was never a fire. It is a transfer with a smokescreen. The crowd fights over the price tag. The party that owes the most and owns the most collects the difference. And it printed the money, wrote the rule, and walked out without ever getting a receipt.